how did the Dementors find Sirius Black? Hey, brother! The end of Harry's third year at Hogwarts is one of the most pivotal moments in his entire life, if not the entire wizarding world. Over the course of 3 hours, Peter is revealed, the story of the Marauders comes out, Peter is captured and very nearly brought to justice, if not for Lupin transforming into a werewolf. Which of course allows Peter to escape once more, and while Sirius is able to recover enough from his battle with Lupin to take chase, that chase is then interrupted by the surprise arrival of the Dementors. And the Dementors, as a refresher, have been staged all around the Hogwarts grounds all year and have been hunting for Sirius the entire time. But I have to tell you, their arrival on the scene at that exact moment has always struck me as odd. Like, how and why were they able to suddenly just find Sirius in the woods, in the dark, while he's transformed as a black dog? A black dog that, mind you, has already been living in the woods of Hogwarts for the entire year, completely unnoticed by the Dementors. I mean, what inopportune timing, am I right? Like, the moment Sirius is chasing down the actual culprit is the same time they finally catch him, because like, until that moment, that night, they have had nothing to do with anything else happening. They are uninvolved. In fact, they have been specifically instructed not to enter the grounds after like the whole Quidditch fiasco earlier in the year, but like more on that later. The Dementors have nothing to do with Lupin being a werewolf or any of the information that gets revealed in the Shrieking Shack. They just happen to show up at the exact wrong moment and very nearly get the better of Sirius, if not from my boy Harry stepping in doing his whole like,
Expecto Patronum!
clutch. And here's the thing, Harry's performance here is so epic and so character defining that for the most part, who even cares how or why the Dementors showed up, right? Because otherwise, what? Like, we just miss out on prongs? Like, I don't think so. But fret not, we have solved this tiny little Wizarding World riddle, and make no mistake, the Dementors' arrival on the scene at the lake is anything but random. In fact, I dare say it's inevitable.
Hey, brother!
Y'all, before we dive on in, we need to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Dementors. They're actually intended to be the physical representation of depression. And the thing is, they really are. Because depression is like a Dementor, feeding on all of the happy thoughts in your mind. But the thing it feeds on can also be a great defense, like practicing positive thinking and gratitude. And trust me, I know it's easier said than done, but that is where therapy can be like so incredibly useful along the way, because there are all sorts of tactics that can make a huge difference if or when you're feeling low. And what's crazy is that a lot of times the best methods feel really obvious until someone asks you if you're actually doing them, which is what actually happened to me very recently. I was talking and my therapist was like, "Are you taking enough time for yourself?" And I was like, "Well, I'm supposed to be, but and then I had this really long introspective think about how, in fact, I was not. And it can really feel like that, like a glass shattering moment, obvious to everyone except you, because I had not been taking time for myself at all. In fact, when I talked to my wife, she was like, maybe we should make some time for you. And then even Ben was telling me the same thing. And I was like, am I the only one who doesn't? So, solution. I found a local coffee shop here, and an hour before work each day, I just go there and have a coffee and get on my laptop and do something for me. And it makes a world of difference. So face down your Dementors with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/super today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/super. Link is in the description down below. What do I think my animagus would be? I mean, okay, someone recently asked me this. I've been thinking about it. But you know how Sirius is always described as like a dog, but like a really, really big dog? So I think that would be the same for me, but instead of a dog, I would be a horse. just like a really, like horses are already big. So like a really big horse. What would you be?
What would I be?
Yeah, what would you be?
I would be a duck.
You would be a duck?
I would be a duck.
We would be a very different kind of marauders. Just giant horse, duck.
Regular sized duck.
Regular duck, not a big duck.
Regular.
Yeah, regular duck. Oh, cool. That's fine. You can fly.
You can fly.
Yeah.
You can fly.
Okay, so how and why are the Dementors able to hunt down Sirius by the lake at just the wrong moment, despite them and him being in the same area all year? Does it have to do with him turning back into a man? Did all the werewolf shenanigans somehow get their attention? No. The first clue we get actually goes back to the Shrieking Shack, when Lupin and Sirius are telling the tale of how they all used to sneak out of the castle and become animagi. Which is a super interesting story, but leaves out some significant details about the evening that Hermione is quick to point out. If you don't mind me asking, how did you get out of Azkaban if you didn't use dark magic? Truly the question at the center of the whole story, isn't it? But like, no one else has ever done it before, so how did Sirius escape? And his answer is twofold. First, just literally how he escaped. Basically that he knew Peter was alive and that he was the only one who knew, so he turned into a dog, slipped out the door when they brought him food, squeezed through the bars and swam to shore. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But second, and more important to today's theory, is how Sirius survived mentally while he was in Azkaban and kept from going completely crazy, which was the knowledge that he was innocent. I think the only reason I never lost my mind is that I knew I was innocent. That wasn't a happy thought, so the Dementors couldn't suck it out of me. But it kept me sane, and knowing who I am helped me keep my powers, so when it all became too much, I could transform in my cell. Become a dog. And this pretty much tracks with how Lupin describes why Patronuses are so good at repelling Dementors. The Patronus is kind of a positive force, a projection of the very things that Dementor feeds upon. Hope, happiness, the desire to survive, but it cannot feel despair as real humans can, so Dementors can't hurt it. Point is, the Dementors feed on happiness, but Sirius, who had lost all of his best friends prior to being delivered to Azkaban, had no happiness, so they couldn't really hurt him that much. Ironically though, the idea that Sirius is innocent is such a happy thought for Harry that he will use it to try and conjure a Patronus himself later on. But so that is really why the Dementors are having such a hard time finding him all year, even though they're in the right place. I mean, Sirius is in the woods. But then something happens when everybody is exiting the Shrieking Shack, when Sirius is talking to Harry. I don't know if anyone ever told you. I'm your godfather. Your parents appointed me your guardian. I'll understand, of course, if you want to stay with your aunt and uncle, said Sirius. But, well, think about it. Once my name's cleared, if you wanted a different home. Are you crazy? Nice fake out, Harry. Leave the Dursleys? Sirius invites Harry to come live with him, and it's basically the best news Harry has ever heard, like ever, and he quickly agrees, which leads to this. Sirius's gaunt face broke into the first true smile Harry had seen upon it. The difference it made was startling, as though a person 10 years younger were shining through the starved mask. For a moment, he was recognizable as the man who had laughed at Harry's parents' wedding. So not only great news for Harry, but basically the best news Sirius has had in 12 years too, like possibly the first happy thought in those 12 years, and it's this enormously happy thought erupting inside of him that makes him shine like a beacon to the Dementors the moment he steps out of the Whomping Willow. At long last, Sirius finally has something for them to feast upon. Even the timing feels right. Like, all the Dementors are stationed around the edges of Hogwarts, and the Willow is pretty close to the castle, so it all happens pretty fast. But the moment they exit the tree, Lupin transforms and starts to fight with Sirius, and then he chases after Peter towards the lake where the Dementors show up. So if the Dementors start moving the moment Sirius emerges, like attracted to his newly happy thought, it would take about that long, it feels like, for them to, drift over. Even Sirius's reaction to the swarming Dementors is interesting for someone who spent 12 years largely unaffected by their power. The yelping stopped abruptly. As they reached the lakeshore, they saw why. Sirius had turned back into a man. He was crouched on all fours, his hands over his head. "No," he moaned. "No, please." Excuse me. It's weird to think that after 12 years of being in the prison, this is the first real moment they're able to harm him. Something else that stands out from that quote is the fact that Sirius is in dog form throughout a lot of the sequence, given that it's his best way to defend everyone else from Lupin. But then I've also always wondered why Sirius transforms back into a man at this point. Like, wouldn't he be a lot more mobile as a dog and harder to detect? Because that is something Ben and I have been discussing a bunch over on Through the Gryffindor, and let me tell you what we've come up with. We think it is because of his fight with Lupin and the wounds he endures during that fight. Sirius was bleeding. There were gashes across his muzzle and back, but at Harry's words, he scrambled up again. You know what I'm hearing is that when it came to being Animagus and how it helped Lupin, it must have almost entirely been coming down to James's contribution as the stag, because Sirius doesn't stand much of a chance on his own here, does he? Either way though, those wounds sound pretty rough, and yet, as a man again, they don't seem to be present. So here's the thought, that wounds you endure as an animal don't transfer to your human form, and yet, wounds endured as a human do transfer to your animal form.
A finger. That's all that was left, a finger.
Even if we just go back to that same line before, it seems to confirm this thought. The yelping stopped abruptly as they reached the lakeshore. They saw why. Sirius had turned back into a man. And this logic then also accounts for Scabbers missing a finger as a rat, and explains why Sirius needed to transform back into a man, because his dog form was just too hurt. So let me know what you think of that explanation in the towel section down below. But what I love about the happiness beacon theory is that it's not even the only time it happens in Prisoner. Think about the other time the Dementors show up en masse. It is during the Quidditch match against Hufflepuff. Lupin says, "I don't think they could resist the large crowd around that Quidditch field. All that excitement, emotions running high, it was their idea of a feast." And maybe he's right. It certainly seems to make sense, and yet Lupin doesn't have all the information here. He is unaware of the match's surprise audience member. Harry saw something that distracted him completely. The silhouette of an enormous, shaggy, black dog, clearly imprinted against the sky, motionless in the topmost empty row of seats. Sirius is at that match, watching Harry play Quidditch, watching his godson, who's the spitting image of his old best friend, James Potter. And he later tells him that he flies as well as James did. And the implication when you're reading it is that it's the Grim, something bad's about to happen. But we also know that it's not the Grim, just that something bad happens to happen. Because I can only imagine that for Sirius, this is the first bit of real enjoyment he's felt since breaking out of Azkaban. Watching Quidditch, back at his old school, seeing Harry do his thing, reminding him of James. True, Sirius is in dog form here and not human, and that as a dog, his emotions are harder to read by the Dementors. And yet, that just makes me like this theory even more, because it means Sirius is truly beaming here watching Harry, beaming with happiness that must set off a massive alarm bell for the Dementors. Because also consider this, it's not as if the Dementors show up at any other Quidditch matches for the rest of the year, even though by then they must be even hungrier and even more starved for happiness emotions. I guess you could argue that maybe they're just afraid of Dumbledore, which, you know, fair concern. And yet, also remember what Fudge says about the Dementors attacking Harry down by the lake. Never dreamed they'd attempt to administer the kiss on an innocent boy. Completely out of control. No, I'll have to have them packed off back to Azkaban tonight. Now, we have a whole theory about this Dementor in particular that attacks Harry. If you want to check that out, like full video by clicking the card. But the point is that it is considered unusual behavior for them to attack an innocent person. Fudge's opinion here demonstrates a certain faith in the Dementors that they would only be looking for Sirius and not attack any of the students. Now, of course, it's possible that Fudge's faith in the Dementors is just, you know, misplaced. In fact, that is one of his extreme flaws as a minister.
He's back!
But in this particular scenario, I think the Dementors are just doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They are there at the school to look for Sirius Black. And, like, guess what? He's there at the Quidditch match. So it's not the excitement of the match that summons them to the field, it's the happiness of the man they're looking for. It just so happens that them being near anyone at all is like bad news, and Dumbledore gets super mad and drives them off before they can complete their mission. I mean, really, if you're serious, maybe the best play is just to like be a dog in crowded places. But you could also pretty easily argue then that this is why the Dementors continue to have such a hard time finding Sirius for the next year, because like, yet again, Sirius has very little to be happy about after Prisoner. I mean, Peter gets away that night and the looming threat of Voldemort's return is thick. And then Harry's name gets in the Goblet of Fire and is almost certainly part of a plot by Voldemort, a ploy that lasts the whole year. And then after that, Sirius is just protected by the protections around Grimmauld Place for a year. So there you go, 12 years in Azkaban, 2 years on the run, 2 entire happy thoughts, 1 year stuck at home, and a big final fight. So not a great final run for the last of the Blacks. But a proper good explanation, I think, for why the Dementors show up when and where they do, not just at the lake, but also at the Quidditch match. I'm just saying, I think as a really big horse, I could have taken Lupin. I mean, who do you think wins in a fight? Werewolf, really big horse, and his duck friend? I know who I'm picking. Like, whatever you're thinking, even bigger. Guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to leave a like on it if you haven't already, and subscribe so you don't miss any future Harry Potter action from us. If you want to see our theory about that rogue Dementor that attacks Harry and its true identity, you can check out this video right here. But Ben, until next time, I will see you in another life.